north. Our last three speakers will take you through the challenges faced in the manufacturing world, to crisis management and how leadership and teamwork combine to resolve a crisis. And we will end the day with the ultimate in innovation and creative forces. As co-founder and managing director of Meccano, Luca Maiocchi's goals have been to protect and develop small and medium enterprises working in the strategic sectors of Italian manufacturing. Working with HSM and the Italian Trade Commission, he is joining us today to bring insights derived from a cross-section of manufacturing professionals into the competitive challenges facing global manufacturers. I am pleased to welcome to the World Business Forum, Mr. Luca Maiocchi.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. A key theme of this conference is that the world has changed, that both in the US and in Europe we will see a weak demand for a long time, and that we'll need to export more. Now, the issue for SMEs is how to cope with all that. And basically, the point I want to make is that they have to find new ways of learning from the market, and new ways of cooperating along the value chain. I will support some of the points I will make using the data from a survey that we have recently done in both North America and Europe, asking to SMEs what are the challenges and the priorities they see for the future. What we know is that the machinery sector has been severely impacted by the economic crisis of 2008 and 2009 due to the fact that investments around the world actually failed. Now, the future will present to SMEs in this sector weak demand in North America and in Europe, where the priority will be mostly to refurbish the existing manufacturing infrastructure, while in the new developing countries such as China, India, Brazil, Russia, and the other ones, there will be strong demand for new equipments in order to build a brand new manufacturing infrastructure to serve the customers in these markets. Now, the key point is what is going to happen in terms of the requirements and the strategic objectives that manufacturers have in Europe and the US. We asked companies in these two regions what are the most important strategic targets that you have for the future. Now, the first finding that you can see in these exhibits is that in both regions, companies are more focused on niche specialization rather than to build new capacity. There is basically overcapacity in many sectors in Europe and in the US, and this is consistent with the overall picture of the economy that we have. However, there is a difference between the strategic targets of companies, or small companies in the two regions. North American companies historically have enjoyed a large domestic market. For this reason, the companies in this continent are less focused on export rather than on serving domestic demand. On the other side, individually, European countries are rather small. Collectively, Europe is large, but individually, the countries are small. And so companies in Germany, Italy, France, and the other European countries historically focused more on export. What is going to happen in the future? In the future, we know that domestic demand in both regions will remain weak, as I said at the very beginning. And for North American companies, for North American SMEs, this will pose new challenges because on one side, they will have more and more competition in this domestic market by companies coming from the Far East with low-cost products that will put pressure on their markets. At the same time, for an SME, building capabilities to export is not an easy game. Small companies do not have the people and the organizational infrastructure that large corporations have built over time. And for them to go and serve markets that are large, very distant geographically, and with different culture might prove very, very difficult. So this challenge is something that in Europe we have seen for many years, and even today for us, I have to say that it is difficult to try to serve these large markets in Asia, because again, this stretches our capabilities. A second issue is what is going to happen to the requirements that manufacturers have on the machinery they use. What we'll see with weak demand in the Western world is that companies will compete more and more on product differentiation. And product differentiation requires different ways of manufacturing the goods. In particular, we see a trend going away from large-scale production to mass customization, in which you have to allow manufacturers actually to produce a very large number of products in small batches. Now, the key question is, what are you asking to the suppliers of your machinery, if you are a manufacturer, when you want to embrace mass customization? And the answer, both in Europe and the US, is quite pragmatic. Companies are asking for more flexible, though standard equipment. And the flexibility through standardization means that they want to have a way to actually produce these small batches in a very cost-effective way. Now, the point is that providing this kind of machinery is very difficult. It's very complex. You need to apply highly sophisticated modular design techniques, modular manufacturing, and only the best suppliers can do that. And given that most of the machinery suppliers are rather small, this will be a challenge for them as well. Third point I want to make is about green manufacturing initiatives. There is a lot of debate and, of course, of attention both in Europe and in the US about this. And we have asked to companies what are they doing in this area. And what came from the survey is that there is, I would say, still a limited number of companies that actually implement this kind of techniques. In the US, in North America in particular, only 37% of the panel actually had green manufacturing initiatives already ongoing. And only 23% actually are using or plan to use in the short term renewable sources of energy. These figures are higher in Europe, where the number of companies with green initiative is 57%, and more than 60% actually already uses or plan to use in the short term renewable source of energy. You can comment this from many perspectives, but the way I want to do that is that, from my point of view, this means or this shows that SMEs actually implement green manufacturing only when they have to. In Europe, environmental regulations are more stringent than here in the US. In many countries, such as Germany, for instance, in Nordic countries, consumers are really well aware of the importance of protecting the environment, and this drives forces and demand to manufacturers. And this, I think, is an important element because we cannot expect that small firms facing pressure on their P&L will invest in this quite heavily without some driving force. At the same time, we know that when regulation changes, that might happen overnight. And if you don't plan in advance, if you don't prepare in advance for green, it is possible that you are get out of the market when the regulation changes. All these three things, mass customization, the need to support flexibility, and the need to support green, ask for competence by the manufacturers of machinery. As you know, the world market of machinery is dominated basically by 4 players. The European leaders, led by Germany and Italy, the US, China, and Japan, that actually provide 65% of all the machines that are used around the world. Over the last 20 years, European countries have developed quite specific skills in this, in particular through a high degree of specialization along value chains and between the cooperation between suppliers and customers across these value chains. This, I think, was one of the key reasons why the Europeans were so good in developing know-how in machinery. At the same time, also European machinery manufacturers face significant challenges because in Western Europe, as I said, demand would remain low. In the new BRIC countries, they face the risk of being not big enough, not large enough to actually work in these large countries, and the risk of unfair competition is also always there. And in North America, the degree of cooperation between the suppliers of machines and manufacturers is historically rather, I would say, much weaker than it has been in Europe. And this limits the possibility for European manufacturers actually to exploit the whole potential of the knowledge they have. So as a closing remark, the point I want to make is that manufacturing, as was said in this forum several times, is key for our economies, in particular for employment and wealth. North America is the largest manufacturer in the world, but new challenges are driven by this weak domestic demand and the need for SMEs to export more. In Europe, we have developed a number of clever models how to cooperate and work together between manufacturers and suppliers in the highly vertically integrated value chains of Made in Europe. And I believe that one thing that we should do in the future together is to try to exploit this virtuous cycle of mutual learning much more than we did in the past. Today, I think waiting is not an option any longer because China, India, and the other countries are running fast, and so it's better that we start quickly to run as well. Thank you.
An incredible